50 or 60 years ago, marriage was the only way to live a successful adult life. 95% of all people got married. If you weren't married, people thought you were mentally ill. It was deeply institutionalized in our laws and our values. It was the way that one was an adult. That's no longer the case. There are other ways you can have a successful adult life. You can be single, you can cohabit, you can move from partnership to partnership. All those are much more acceptable. You can be in an open gay and lesbian relationship, which really wasn't possible in the 1950s or 60s. So all of a sudden, there are many different ways you can live your family life. Marriage has become de-institutionalized, meaning it's no longer as fully supported by our laws and by our values. Sure, we support marriage, but we support other ways too. A lot of people talk about how Americans don't get married as much as they used to, and that's certainly true. But I think the question is, why do they get married so much? I mean, why does anybody get married anymore? Have they just not heard the news that you don't have to? Well, it seems like marriage is still very popular. About 4 out of 5 young adults will do it. But it has a different meaning than it used to have. Marriage used to be the first step into adulthood. You did it early. You did it in your early 20s. Then you got a job. Then you got an apartment. Then you had kids. Today, marriage is almost the last step into adulthood. It's something you don't do until you have everything else in good shape. And in particular, it's something you don't do until you and your partner have a good economic basis, until you think your partner and you can earn a good living, keep the family going economically. You tend not to marry. You just cohabit. And so people wait a long time to marry. And when they do, it's often after they've had kids, after they've had a job for a while, after they've lived together for a long time, maybe even lived with a couple of people beforehand. But they still do marry. So what does marriage mean? Well, marriage used to be very practically important. You couldn't get a job if you weren't married. People thought you were weird. It no longer has that kind of practical significance. But I think its symbolic value, its virtue as a symbol of leading the good life, is more than it used to be. That is to say, practically speaking, marriage is less necessary, but symbolically, it's distinctive, it's more important. Precisely because not everybody does it, it's a symbol of saying, I have a good personal life, and I want to celebrate that by getting married. And so people do get married at the end of this long sequence of early adulthood, sometimes at age 30, sometimes older. And when they do, they want a big party to celebrate it. And the party is about them. I mean, it used to be the case that marriages were put on by two families who were bringing together a bride and a groom and merging their families. It was a very formal event. But today, it's often done by the couple themselves. The husband and the wife might themselves pay for the marriage. Unheard of 50 or 60 years ago. Because the marriage is about them. It's not about their family so much. It's about them. It's about celebrating what they can do. It's about showing that they've made it. When you talk to cohabiting young adults in their 20s, some of them will say to you, I'm not going downtown for a wedding. Well, what does that mean? Going downtown means going to the justice of the peace in the mayor's office downtown in your city and getting a piece of paper and getting married in front of a justice of the peace with nobody else. It works perfectly fine. You're legally married. But people today say they're not going to go downtown for a wedding. They want a big party. They want a reception. Well, why is that? You'd think if marriage was not as important, they would be happy to just go down to the justice of the peace and save $10,000 or $20,000. In fact, they want to spend that money. They want to have a big party to show themselves and others that they have made it. I think that's why same-sex marriage is such a big issue in the U.S. compared to some of the other countries. In Britain, there's a national domestic partnership law, but there's not a lot of agitation for same-sex marriage. Same in France. The reason is, in Britain and France, marriage doesn't seem to have this same symbolic value. People have long cohabiting relations that last for decades. And so, gay and lesbian activists in Britain and France aren't so keen on marriage. They say, why are we bothering with marriage? In the U.S., however, marriage is still a very potent symbol of having a first-class personal life. And gay and lesbian Americans want to be able to have that symbol available to them too. If marriage weren't important in this symbolic way, I don't think we would be having the tough debates that we're having about this issue, because I think it wouldn't be as important to everyone. But what we've seen is that marriage still does have that potent symbolic value in the U.S. Now, will this stay like this? It's always tempting to say that whatever's happening today will continue for the next 20 years. And so to say, sure, marriage will continue to have this strong symbolic value and most people will marry. But it's not necessarily true. We're in the midst of a very, very sharp period of social change in family life in the U.S. Enormous changes in the last half century. And there's no real reason to think we're at the end point. It may be in 20 years, in 30 years, that people will look back at our age and say, imagine that, most people got married. Today, nobody gets married because it doesn't mean much. I'm not saying that will happen. I'm just saying we don't know. We don't know whether marriage will continue to have this new symbolic value and remain important, or whether it will gradually fade as it has in Europe, in many countries already. Right now, though, it's still with us, and a lot more people get married than you might think.
I just want to highlight something. I want to address something, first of all, to the young people who are being pressured into getting married. I just want to say just a couple of things to you guys. It's not the solution to all of your problems, but at least I'll highlight some things. First and foremost, the relationship you're getting into, you don't go into a marriage thinking you're going to get divorced. You go into a marriage because this is going to be the next half of your life. This is a lifelong commitment. This is the next 50, 60 years of your life. It's not a light decision. A lot of times all you think about is the marriage ceremony, the party, making your parents happy. That's right now. What about 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now? Because this one decision decides the direction of the rest of your life. So if there was one time where you speak out and say your opinion and take a stand, with all due respect, this is the time. You're not being disrespectful. This is a right Allah gave you. This is a serious decision, which has to do with your life, not your parents' life more than it has to do with yours. Of course, you should be making a wise decision on who you marry and what kind of person they should be, and your parents should have a say in that. But if your parents don't have exclusive say, the dominant say is actually yours. And subhanAllah, and even the ayah, وَأَخَذْنَا مِنْكُمْ, they've taken from you, the women have taken from you. Allah didn't even mention their walis. He mentioned the women themselves. You are going to be, the sisters I'm talking to now, you have to be comfortable with the person you're marrying. Of course, if you come from a conservative family and a religiously observing family, you don't go out and party. You don't go talk to men casually. You're not going to get to know the guy by going on a few dates before you decide. Of course, you're not going to be comfortable entirely with marriage because it's a new thing in your life, but at least you're going to have some level of comfort with the idea. You're going to be, okay, you know what, this seems like a good person. To my side, as best as I can find out within the realm of Sharia, this seems to be a good person. I think this is a good match for me. Allahu A'lam if it's the best match, and sometimes people get married and they get divorced. This even happened with Sahaba. But we do our due diligence, right? You have to be happy going in. You shouldn't be settling in a relationship going in. The same is true of guys. Guys, speak up and, let your opinion be heard. That doesn't mean you're being disrespectful unless you're being disrespectful in the way you say it. See, disrespect is not about what you say. A lot of times what you say is legitimate. It's your right. You have the right to say something. But how you choose to say it, the tone you choose to use, all of these things matter. So be wise in how you bring this up to your elders. To the elders, I'd like to say that if your children are 24, 25, even 22, 23 years old, they're way over adults. And if they come to you saying, I want to marry this girl, or I want to marry this man, then first of all, and you're living in the West, let me add one more condition here. If you're living in the West, then try to understand something. They would not have brought this proposal up if they weren't serious. Second of all, they're not children anymore. You can call them children when they're 85 years old and you're 150. It won't matter. They're not children anymore. They're adults. And this is not a kid going to a toy shop saying, I want to buy that toy, but get me an Iron Man action figure. And so you just yell at them and say, no, that's not for you. Buy the Ninja Turtles instead. No. This is not the purchase of a toy. This is a life decision. And these young people, you should discuss this decision with them. But for a lot of you parents, when they bring up a proposal, you're like, no way. Are you kidding me? And it becomes a matter of pride that your child chose a person, not you. Look, you brought them into a Western society. They're mingling with men and women all the time. The fact that they may have found somebody Maybe not in the most, acceptable means Islamically, but it's already happened. They already like somebody. They're already interested in marrying someone. And you shut them down and you say, no way, this will never happen. This is a matter of our pride. This is a matter of our religion. Well, there are so many other matters of your religion where you ignore to teach them properly, where you ignore to provide them a healthy environment. And now you're getting angry at them for, making a choice or even suggesting a choice. At least consider the choice. Become more open-minded about the possibilities. The world around you has changed. The way you got married, the way even, my parents got married is a different time. Those norms, those standards, cultural standards have changed. The world around us has changed, So we have to be open to the choices that our children are making. Look, if you're sending your son to college, you have enough trust in him to send him to college, to let him work in a non-Muslim society. If you're sending your daughter to school and she's getting an education in a non-Muslim society, you trust her enough to send her out into a cruel, corrupt world, and to survive and uphold her values. So then you have to trust her enough with her decision. At least enough to consider her decision. Even if you don't like the choice at first, at least to consider that decision. So be a little more open-minded about this discussion and control the tempers. No, there's no need for overly dramatic language. There's no need for, oh my God, all of my dreams have shattered and you're no longer my son and all of this stuff. Just take it easy. Take it easy. Everybody needs to be able to say how they feel. In many Muslim cultures, parents don't open up. They only open up when it's too late. And children don't say anything because they're too afraid of what their parents might think. We need to change that culture. We need to have a culture of open, honest, and yet at the same time respectful communication.